Let me tell you the story of how I flew my paraglider 167 kilometres from the Malvern Hills to Narberth in Pembrokeshire. It was Friday the 26th of May 2023. I started the day with an hour and a half heavy work starting building a retaining wall in our garden in West Malvern. I had a shower, changed into my paragliding clothes, made some sandwiches and packed some snacks for the day. I set off walking from the house at about 11 o'clock and arrived at the takeoff on the east side of Worcestershire Beacon at about 11:30. On the way up, I explained to an interested couple about paragliding and told them I was hoping to fly to Wales, which I haven't managed to do yet this year. At the top of the hill, I had the hill to myself. I took my time converting my shorts back into long trousers. I strapped into my harness and turned on my phone apps, XC Track for its mapping and Tracker for putting my position on Live Track 24. I launched into quite a headwind, which lifted me upwards whilst I was barely going forwards, so I glided out away from the hill. When I realised I was getting a bit low, I turned to head back to the hill. I was quite low and it looked like I was going to have to land on Peachfields Common. I turned off a phone call from my brother. This was not a good time for a chat. I was down to below 240 metres. But I found a good thermal just over the edge of the housing estate and I circled tightly in it. This thermal took me up nicely above the witch cutting, higher and higher up to about 950 metres. My cross-country flight had begun. My task was mostly to stay up and get blown to Wales with the east-northeasterly wind, which is where I had said I had wanted to go. Often the clouds would indicate where the thermals were, but often they didn't. Somehow I managed to keep finding thermals to circle in, sometimes getting up to cloud base. If I wanted to do a good distance, I couldn't let the wind drift me too far to the south, or I would end up in controlled airspace around Cardiff, or reach the coast before Pembrokeshire. Looking ahead, I had to fly between the two danger areas west of Hereford. The wind was blowing from the northeast at times, but I wanted to head more to the right. Circling took me with the wind, taking me off to the left, so I made my glides between thermals take me more to the right, bringing me back on course. The XC Track app on my phone had updated itself that morning, but now much of the map was glitching and I couldn't see towns or roads on the map for most of the time. Fortunately, the airspaces were still marked well. I could see I was getting close to the Pontrilas danger area. You can see that I only missed it by a few tens of metres. It was around here that I noticed an orange paraglider catching up with me. He overtook me as we started crossing the Black Mountains.
There he is.
Crossing the mountains is worrying on a strong wind day, so I was glad that I started the crossing at cloud base. There's real pressure to keep high as the terrain is so much higher, but there seemed to be plenty of thermals to turn in. It was a relief to get beyond the Black Mountains. The map glitching wasn't a problem, as I knew where I was going. I'd flown this way last year on a flight to Llandilo. This time my track was more to the left, taking me to the right of Pen y Fan. I flew over a group of people doing paragliding top to bottom at Heol Senni. I got lower than the mountains a couple of times before flying over the last of the Brecon Beacons, the confusingly named Black Mountain. This is a large area of bleak, uncivilised moorland, which could take me the rest of the day to walk out of.
Amazing! Right over the Brecon Beacons, the most obscure part of the Brecon Beacons.
I was so pleased that I managed to stay high over these mountains. When I realised I had cleared the last of the mountains, I felt jubilant and celebrated by eating my apple, which tasted heavenly. I'd not drunk any water since leaving the house, to save me needing a toilet break on the flight. I flew over Castle Carrick-Kennen, which I visited on the ground. It looked awesome from above. There were too many thermals to tell you of them all. I had started to set my sights on Carmarthen, which has a train station, but I realised that I would easily get there, so I looked ahead to my next destinations. There was no train at St Clair's, so I risked trying to get to the next station at Whitland. With my map glitching, it was great to chat to my wife on the phone, and she planned the route for me and told me which places had stations. I had to use Google Maps to understand the way, which was a bit awkward. There were convergence clouds over St Clair's, and it was easy to stay high. There were great views to the left of the Gower, Rossilly Down, Pembrokeshire and Pendine, and to the right the Preseli Mountains. As I glided down over Whitland, I realised I just had enough height to glide to Narberth. I got there with just enough height to check out where the station is, find a good landing field, put in a couple of turns and land at 5:07 p.m. I had flown 167 kilometres, over 50 kilometres further than my furthest paragliding flight up to this point. The train journey had a delay and a missed connection, so my wife had to come and pick me up from Hereford. I got home before midnight. What an epic day! I'm so pleased with myself.